Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. Happy New Year, both Gregorian New Year and the Lunar New Year. Today is February 24th, 2026. I'm Danny Park, President of the Royal Asiatic Society Korea. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and we warmly welcome all our friends and members here in Seoul, as well as those joining us via Zoom. And I would like to express RAS Korea's sincere gratitude to the Asia Development Foundation for their continued financial support. And as always, please note that the views expressed in tonight's lecture do not necessarily represent the opinions or positions of the Royal Asiatic Society Korea. The reason I am going through this fairly quickly is we have a lot of good content tonight, as well as some of the updates that I need to tell you about. Okay. Tonight marks lecture number 1537 since the beginning in 1900. And since this is our first lecture of the year, as well as we have very distinguished speaker tonight, Dr. Olena Borysova from Green Climate Fund. For those who don't know what Green Climate Fund is, she'll talk about it more, but it's a subsidiary organization of the United Nations located in Songdo. So in honor of such a distinguished guest, we are making this lecture free of charge and open to everyone. People will be joining us through Zoom as well. Okay. Before telling you a little more about Olena, there are a few updates I need to cover quickly. Number one, transactions. Yes, it will come out soon. We are still putting on the final touches. Mostly on my part, there'll be email webpage accepting orders for transactions fairly soon. Why is it this important? Because this is volume 99, and we have to get through volume 99 to get to the next year's volume 100, which will be a special issue. Okay. And I've been busy working with ADF and other things because this is that part of the year where our funding decision is made. This is also up in the air right now, but I'm pretty sure we'll get some money. And there's been a lot of shuffle within ADF as well. So we're waiting for the final word. Okay, as well as nonprofit status. Some of you may already know that we lost our nonprofit status when we're going through some paperwork during the challenging days of RAS, and we will be back on nonprofit status, but the final decision we'll find out in March. And then the interim council, aka the former presidents, we have nailed down the structure of the new council and council members, so that will be happening very soon. Announcement will be made, and that will be part of our transaction volume 99. Last time that was published within transaction was year 1900. So I think it's up for due for an update. And also, I've been contacted by Friends of Korea. It's a group of former Peace Corps volunteers who served in Korea. It's headquartered in Washington, D.C. And now we're in discussions to create a lecture or lecture series that will repeat every year in honor of late Suzanne Crowder-Han. We're talking about making a series of lectures or events or something to commemorate her, because not only the contribution to us, but contribution Suzanne had made to their organization as well. And last but not least, I know there are a lot of authors in this room. RAS has a lot of authors among our members, and we have the latest one, book 이태원에 삽니다. She's the author right there. Just FYI. Talk to her, get a signed copy, purchase signed copy, sorry. Okay, and going forward, if there's anything else you wanna advertise to other members, please let us know. Okay. All right, on to the lecture this evening. Olena Borysova, she's right there, is a climate finance and sustainable development specialist with more than 20 years of experience in climate change, energy and resource efficiency, environmental governance, policy, and institutional capacity for capacity building. And she currently serves as the principal in the investment service department at the Green Climate Fund in Songdo. And she's leading the efforts to strengthen direct access to climate finance and enhance developing countries' ability to mobilize and manage climate investments. This may not be something that you can easily relate to. Let me put it this way. When I was communicating with her about organizing this lecture, it took 3 days just to have a one-way communication. She was flying home from Africa, and three days later, she was still flying home from Africa. So it's been a challenging but enjoyable process. And prior to joining GCF, Olena worked as worked at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development as principal for policy and climate finance, and as well as earlier life, she also worked in energy programs in Ukraine. I know some of you are thinking about potential questions in that side. I know I am. She was also Fulbright visiting scholar to the United States in earlier days, as well as a postdoc researcher at the University of Bologna in Italy. Did I get that right? And she holds advanced degrees from Ukraine and United Kingdom, all on environmental related fields. So I'm not going to talk too much about her talk because I don't want to eat up her time. So I'll have her introduce herself and a little more in detail and the talk itself. So please welcome Lena.
Thank you very much, Danny. This is an excellent introduction, and I don't think we'll need to waste any more time on introductions, although I would love to actually know you colleagues as well. So whenever you ask questions, I would really appreciate, just for my information, if you can say your name and maybe what you're doing, just so that I can shape my response maybe better. And yes, the thing that I'm going to talk about might, at the beginning, sound a little bit too technical, but I really want to make this talk engaging, and I really want to hear from you as well. I intend to talk less than maybe even Danny asked me to, but instead I prepared a couple of discussion questions, and these questions are burning questions that we are bringing up in GCF as well, constantly debating, they're shaping our agenda. So I would really, I'm really looking forward to our conversation rather than lecturing you. I would be looking at my screen as well, because some of my talk is based on data, and I do want to make it right. Let's see if the technology is on our side. Yes. Okay. So what is the climate challenge? Why we even talking about it? Okay. Yep, here. So the graphs talks for themselves, right? It's always better to see the picture. On the right-hand side, on your right, you see the growth of the average temperature. We can dig into how this is measured, but these are reliable data that are used internationally. And there is no debate now that climate is warming up. But what's important is that we bear in mind that we are not talking about global warming as such, we are talking about climate change. You might remember this February, I think, one of the infamous tweets from one of the representatives of the US government was, okay, what are you talking about? Where is the global warming? There is the blizzard and snowstorms. What are you even discussing? So climate change is making our climate more and more extreme. The climate is becoming drier where it's warm. It's becoming warmer and wetter where it is already raining. There are floods, there are extreme events. And we can again debate on the origin of it. And just to share on a personal note, my dad is quite he made quite significant contribution into physics. He's a mechanical engineer, and he's a climate denier. Not climate change as such, but he does not believe that this is anthropogenic. But it essentially doesn't matter because we are facing a harsh reality. We are facing the changes in land use. We are facing the changes in air quality. Anthropogenic or not, we need to do something with that. That's one aspect of climate change. Another aspect is that if we believe that it's anthropogenic, we look at the root causes, and these are using a fossil fuel. If we don't believe that it's anthropogenic, do we still want to burn less fossil fuel? Yes, we do. We want air better quality, right? Also, a fossil fuel are exhaustible, they're finite. So we are way beyond the time of this theoretical debate on whether there is climate change or not. We arrived to the time when we need to discuss what to do with that. So, as often happens in debating a complex dilemma, we face the situation when we need money to resolve the issue, right? The humanity under the umbrella of United Nations has been trying to mobilize finance to address climate change for quite some time. And call me too technocratic if you wish, but I believe that we were relatively successful. Yes, we are still not addressing climate change as we would want to, but we came up with several quite creative ideas of how we can treat climate change globally. Okay, yeah. However, at some point, we understood that we need to act in much more consolidated manner. The issue of climate change is that it is not localized. The fossil fuel or emissions that are burned in one part of the world are causing climate change effects in completely different part of the world. So we need to work together. And even without complex geopolitical context of developed versus developing countries dynamics, we will not be able, just because of the scale, just because it is global, just because the physics of the dilemma, it became obvious that we have to cooperate and to consolidate our efforts. And that is why United Nations put together something that was called, you might have heard, that was called the Paris Agreement. By the time, under the Paris Agreement, a group of, in the course of preparation of Paris Agreement, a group of prominent economists and geographers got together, and modelists, and people who were working on the mathematical models, they got together and they provided an estimate of how much money humanity needs to invest to arrive to where we want to be. I thought it is a pointer, but it's okay. If not, it's okay. Let's keep it like that. That's fine. So we want to arrive to the scenario where the changes are still reversible, right? We want to avoid a cliffhanger. When the changes in the atmosphere and the change in the global ecosystem are irreversible. So we estimated about 30 years ago, we as a humanity, as a collective, we estimated that we would need to invest about $100 billion per year to prevent global catastrophe. Now, even if you think that you have this money, next question would be, what do you do with them? So issue aside, how do you raise them? How do you invest them in an efficient way so that you address root causes of climate change, but also you address absolutely catastrophical inequalities that climate change is causing, catastrophic impact on the society as such. How do you pick? How do you choose? Do you address defrosting of Arctic permafrost, or do you build better melioration systems for the rice field? Right? So somebody needs to manage this money, and somebody needs to manage this money using strong climate rationale. So this is how the Green Climate Fund was born. Okay, I need to go before. I'm a little bit non-systematic with my slides, but I wanted to go to the slide with GCF story. Yeah. So this is when GCF was born. GCF is a financial instrument of Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is the UN convention, and we are the financial instrument of this convention. So our purpose, our raison d'etre, is to finance projects, is to fundraise money from developing countries to invest in the climate finance project in developed countries to address global climate issues. So we are based in a beautiful Songdo. It is beautiful. It's very nice. The only slight disadvantage that is that it takes more than 1 hour to travel to this beautiful city, but still. And we are an organization of about 300 international experts and from all over the world. I think we have people, if I'm not mistaken, from more than 50 countries. And in the beautiful G Tower provided to us very kindly by the metropolitan government of the city of Incheon. And we are celebrating 10 years this year. So, or rather in 2025, we celebrated 10 years since GCF financed first, the board of GCF approved first 8 climate finance projects. We are absolutely unique organization. We are what is called new type of funds. We are governed by the board, non-sitting board. It means that our board members, they are not based in Songdo, they are only visiting us 3 times a year. And our board includes 24 members, 12 from developed countries, 12 from developing countries. I would highly encourage those of you who are interested in climate change, especially if you are maybe a college student, especially if you're interested in being exposed to real life political debates, all our board meetings are broadcasted online, live. So our board meetings, it's on if you Google GCF board, you will get the videos. And some of the board proceedings are extremely boring. Some of the board proceedings are extremely engaging because it is indeed a real policy debate going on live between our contributors who are providing finance to us. Germany, for example, was for the last replenishment cycle was the biggest contributor. And our recipients who are still playing a very active role, and rightly so. First of all, because developing countries, we all know that developing countries are suffering from the climate impact. But second of all, this is something that I wanted to talk to you. Second of all, is because it is becoming more and more obvious that we will not be able to resolve climate change issues unless we change the business patterns, and not only in developed countries. We need to change the business patterns all over the world. We need to help developing countries to make this leapfrog, just transition, to avoid these horrible mistakes that I'm from Ukraine, so not we in the West, but developed countries in the West made when essentially the industrialization and industrial development and the social development that followed was bought, was paid for by the price of significant environmental deterioration. unless we help developing world, and this is my personal, personal professional view, and this is in line with GCF mandate. Our mandate is to support change of business patterns all over the world, so that the business becomes, and business, when I say business, I'm talking about both public and private sector. The business needs to become more climate friendly. And this is a super challenging task. Now, coming back to a couple of previous slides. Oh, yeah, maybe, yeah. I wanted to talk a little bit of why climate change is so technically complex, and why climate change is so significantly linked to the fossil fuel issues. So, making a step back from the boardroom and global policy and politics, let's step into the physical or chemical laboratory. Do we know how to make organic molecules from inorganic molecules? Can we replicate what plants all around us and all around the globe do on an everyday basis? Can we take water, CO2, and produce sugar? And then when we consume sugar or we burn sugar, we produce energy. We know theoretically how it works. We understand the principle. We could replicate some of the processes in the laboratory, but we still cannot do it at the same elegant and resource efficient way as the nature does it. If there is anybody in this room or out those who are listening to us could come up with a solution, this will be a breakthrough. This will be a complete game changer. I'm talking to engineering, chemical, physical students, guys. If we manage without high temperature, high pressure, extreme input of energy, if we manage to reproduce what nature does, photosynthesis, we will get away from this vicious circle of being dependent on carbon. Because essentially fossil fuel is nothing more than carbon, right? We need to burn carbon either in our bodies when we burn calories, right? It's exactly the same. We consume energy, we burn it, and that's how we maintain, we are sustained. The same, unfortunately, this is exactly the basis of our economies and of the global economy. Our global economy is now built on the principle of burning carbon-contained substances and using the energy that is released. And the CO2 and other pollutants are the byproduct of this process. Therefore, despite all the technological progress and all the technological achievements, we are still unable to get away from fossil fuel. And this is more complex than just physics or engineering. Industrialization took about 100 years to change the business patterns, speaking modern language. Decarbonization would, if we allow it, probably take the same. But we are not in position to allow it, right? We want to jump over. We want to shorten this time period. We want to accelerate decarbonization. And this is exactly where GCF comes handy. So if you move to the next slide, please, and the next one. Yeah, if you could push all through so that we see, I think we went through more or less our mandate. And I think we already discussed that we are trying to focus on the transformative systems change. What probably would be important to mention is that we are a very ambitious organization. We have now a vision of mobilizing 50 billion by 2030. And those of you who listen to me a little bit probably would immediately say, okay, you told us we need 100 billion per year and you are planning only to mobilize 50 in 4 years. How is it helpful? It is only helpful if we are able to fulfill our mandate. And our mandate is to support innovation. Our mandate is to support projects with strong climate rationale. And our mandate is to be enabler. We are not as such financier. We are super interesting organization. If you look at the existing models, we are more or less unique. And this is not because I work in GCF. This is because it is unique. There are multinational development banks. Everybody knows about World Bank, right? Asian Development Bank, African Development Bank, European Bank of Reconstruction and Development. Their modus operandi is they need to demonstrate how countries could run their economies in an efficient, market-oriented way. It means that they come to the country, identify the projects that could be invested, that could be financially viable, invest into these projects, of course, build internal capacities, but their role is to work on specific projects that are aligned with their investment programs and their agenda. I am very far from denying a very important and crucial role that NDPs play, but GCF is very, very different in a way that we work with the countries based on the country's own climate agenda. And we work with the countries based on the idea that we should be final. We should be able to cease to exist. We should be able to mobilize finance in a way to enable national institutions to access to climate finance base and essentially to make all economies green and climate friendly. One of our very important programs with GCF is greening banking financial sector. And I know it might sound a little bit idealistic and maybe naive if you, I unfortunately do not know what are your fields of expertise and interests, but some of you might relate. If you come to the bank, even now, even in Korea, which is a very advanced country, but if you come to any public or commercial bank and start talking to them to climate finance projects, they would be very polite, but you probably would not get too much traction. There are many more other areas where banking people see bigger potential. But trust me, 20 years ago, they wouldn't even know what is climate finance. And I think climate finance is now repeating the same trajectory as the sustainability finance took about 20 and 30 years ago, only when the businesses realized that environmental issues pose risk to their businesses, pose risks to their money, then where sustainability departments starting popping out like starting mushrooming in all businesses all over the world. This is what we need to do. We need to integrate climate finance into the global financial architecture. Now, how do we do it? I think we can skip this slide. We already talked enough about GCF. Now, so how do we do it? It's all very well to talk about what needs to be done, but it's almost impossible, as we already agreed at the beginning of our talk, it's almost impossible to do something if you don't have money. So one of the pillars of our finance is that we want to mobilize finance at scale. We want to demonstrate that climate finance is investable. And for that, we need to invest at scale. And we also need to invest at scale because we want to make an impact in scale. And of course, this is one of our KPIs, is the CO2 emissions decreased per dollar invested, and therefore we want to invest as much as possible. That's why 50 by 30 is quite an ambitious goal for us. Then we want to strengthen the institutions, and I think I covered this pillar, but just to emphasize that we work with, I have a slide, we will talk a little bit about whom do we work with in Korea. But for example, in Japan, we have a client, a Mitsubishi Bank, SMBC, MUG. They are huge. They have a lot of money. So why would they even partner with us? And how can we influence their business patterns? We can influence their business patterns by strengthening their climate capacity. And believe me or not, but this is a very serious incentive. We have other commercial organizations, and all our partners, by the way, are available on our website. The list of 158 accredited entities are available, and you will see there such institutions as BNP Paribas, also mentioned in UFG, Macquarie, a huge Australian equity fund. They are interested in new investment horizons, and they're using cooperation with us by strengthening their climate finance. In the developing countries, we just recently signed, my department where I work, signed agreement to provide technical assistance to a commercial bank in Nepal, and also to strengthen their climate capacities. And we also work not only through investment. We have a very diverse network of partners with whom we co-invest and who co-finance our projects. And we believe, again, maybe a little bit, I don't want to say naive, but maybe a little bit ideological, let's say, but we do believe that partnering with us would help them to develop their skills and their institutional capacities. We go to the next slide, please. And yep, maybe make it. So we work trying to strike a very difficult balance. Climate change realizes itself in two very different ways. One is direct emissions, right? So when we, as mentioned, when we burn fossil fuels, there are emissions, we emit CO2, we emit other pollutants, the temperature rises. What could be done with that? We can address this pollution at core. And as any other type of pollution, there are various technological planning, economical instruments to address this. This work stream is called mitigation. We maintain essentially, no, it probably wouldn't be right to say we maintain the same level of consumption. We try to decrease the consumption. We try to encourage the most energy efficiency ways in the economical work stream. But we address the pollution at core, and this is mitigation. But we also all understand that climate change has indirect impacts. Pollution is an immediate impact, right? When there is too much coal burned, the air quality is bad. But apart from that, the sea is rising. It's not a consequences of the pollution, right? But it is a consequences of climate change. The land use patterns are changing. I mean, you name it. The crops are not becoming ripe in time or overgrew, or we can see, for example, the link with the health. I'm often asked, what is the link between the climate change and health? And of course, the distribution of the diseases change. We need to address this as well. We cannot leave this unattended. And this is work stream that is called adaptation. And according to our mandate, GCF mandate, we need to maintain 50-50% within our portfolio of adaptation and mitigation projects. You would imagine it's not an easy task. And it's not an easy task because of technological complexities. It is not an easy task because of political components of the decision making. On where do you invest? Do you invest in energy production and decrease pollution, or do you invest in farming and improve people's life immediately? It's a very tricky question. And again, if you look at our board proceedings, this is exactly the issues that are being debated. So, and if we go to the next slide, please. I'm sorry I didn't master this. This is our numbers. Everybody loves numbers, right? So we committed. When we say committed, it means that we identified projects and projects agreements are signed, almost 20 billion for the 10 years of our existence. And our portfolio value is almost 80 billion. So we have a very decent co-investment ratio for climate investment projects. Maybe for commercial projects is not particularly high, but for climate investments, we are very proud of that. And as I mentioned, we want to become 30. This is very challenging in the current geopolitical situation, but we are confident we will do our best to achieve it. If you go to the next slide, please. Next number, yeah, all three. These are very nice curves. This is the number of the countries, the number of the projects, and GCF financing. You know, we grew very steadily. But I do want to bring your attention to this, to the most left side graph, because this is something that we are proud of, but there is still a lot to do. 155 countries are eligible to receive our finance. It's definition of the developing countries. We now have 134 receiving our money, and that means that some of these countries maybe only receive technical assistance money. Some of these countries might not have national one country projects. So for example, we have quite a few of the projects that address issues in several countries. But out of 155 countries, only about 1/3 of the countries has institutions, national partners that are accredited to work with GCF. And this is something where I personally I am involved, and this is something where there is a very significant room for us for improvement. Let me explain, please. If we go to the next slide, I hope the next slide will demonstrate the network of our accredited entities. I'm very proud of this slide. This is 100, as I mentioned, this is 158 of direct regional, direct national, and international organizations. It's our jargon, direct accredited entities. It means that these are the entities that are registered and implement projects in developing countries. Now it looks wonderful, right? And I had a privilege to essentially work with about 1/3 of them, bringing them to the board. Why do they need to go to the board? Because the board needs to have a comfort that these accredited entities have capacities and willingness and systems to implement our projects on our behalf in line with the highest financial and environmental standards. We not just provide climate finance, we provide climate finance on the conditions that this climate finance is used in a sustainable, prudent, transparent way. And this is why anybody who wants to work with us needs to go through the process that we call accreditation. Simply speaking, it's a strategic due diligence. Again, those of you who are maybe in business know that even if you go, or even if you're not in business, but if you go to a bank and want to get a loan, they will do check on you, right? What are your source of income? Are you able to pay back? Do you have any, I don't know, legal issues? Do you have any other loans that you are not able to pay back? So this is the due diligence on the clients. We do strategic due diligence on the clients. Each and every of these 158 organizations demonstrated to us, going through the review by the independent technical body, very senior environmental and fiduciary experts, they went through the review and demonstrated that they are able to meet our standards and policies. And what's even more important, they demonstrated to us that they are ready to work with their executing entities, with their subcontractors, so that their subcontractors would be in line with our standards and policies as well. Out of this 158, if we can go to the next slide, there are two organizations that are based here in Korea. We are working with KOICA and we are working with Korea Development Bank. KOICA doesn't have project with us yet, but they went through accreditation. KDB has already 3 projects with us and they are working across South Asia. I believe the links, I don't know, are we planning to share the PPT?
We can if you're not.
It's okay, yeah, it's the public. So I believe the links are active in the PPT. So if we go to the next slide, this is just to illustrate that we work with organizations based in Korea. This is how we operate. Again, unlike multinational development banks, we don't have offices on the ground. We are talking about regionalization now, so we might have regional presence, but we will still not be implementing projects ourselves. And we will not even provide hands-on oversight of the project. By the process of accreditation, by the process of strategic due diligence, we ensure that our partners are able to design and implement projects themselves. And I cannot emphasize enough how important it is and how it is different from any other funds and multilateral financial institutions. Imagine we want Korean Development Bank or we want MUFG themselves to design a project proposal on climate finance, to bring it to us, to demonstrate what are the fiduciary governance instruments they are planning to use, what are the integrity safeguards, anti-corruption measures, anti-money laundering measures they will be using when they will use our money, what are the environmental and social safeguards that they will put on the project. They themselves, our accredited entities, need to design projects fully in line with all these expectations. And these projects of BNP Paribas, they need to promise us that everybody who will be using our money under BNP Paribas projects, everybody, up to the very last beneficiary, will use our money in line with the standards and policies. That's why when you hear that GCF is slow, GCF is bureaucratic, GCF is ineffective, it's not 100% true. Yes, we could have been more efficient, but there is a reason why we are so demanding. And this reason is twofold. Firstly, it is because we are using public money. But secondly, it is because our purpose is not just to invest in scale. Our purpose is to invest with the impact, and our purpose is to enable further investments. We really truly believe that through our partnership, organizations change their business pattern. Even if our finance represents a minuscule share of their portfolio, as it happens with huge commercial corporations, or for some entities, smaller entities in developing countries, our finance represents a substantial share of their portfolio, and there, of course, our impact is bigger. But that brings us to the next dilemma, and if we go, we can skip to next slides, Danny. They are just description of our expectations. Yeah, and the next one, please. These are the descriptions of our expectations of the accredited entities. So this is our portfolio, and it's not updated. It's as of August 2025. There is a better numbers now on our website. Again, going back to the our jargon, direct access entities in developing countries, simply speaking. Now you would see that we are doing pretty well in terms of numbers of the entities accredited from developing countries. So there are quite a few institutions out of 158 now. We have about half of them from developing countries. We're doing great, right? No, wrong. Why? For two reasons. Only half of these 83 have projects with us. And this is the whole idea, right? They shouldn't go through strategic due diligence and just stop. Well, some of them do, because let's be frank, it's a little bit of a stamp of approval. You are accredited to GCF, your business patterns are good, which we don't mind, it's also okay. But we want them to use our money. And they stumble when they need design their own projects. So this is a huge issue. And then the second issue is that even those half of direct access entities who are programming with us, they only use about 20% of our overall financing. Of course, the mamas in our portfolio, like EBRD, like World Bank, they're all accredited. They also use our money. They work in developing countries with our money, but they're internationals. And of course, they can mobilize financing scale, right? There is not a problem for Asian Development Bank. They're coming to us and they have capacity to design very good projects. And there is nothing wrong with these projects, because they're projects in Vietnam and Cambodia, all over their region of operations. They have excellent climate rationale. The only issue with these projects is that the enabling capacities of these types of the projects are not to the extent that we want. We want to enable direct access countries. But some of our contributors expect scale. So something that I'm going to finalize my presentation in maybe 5 minutes. And after I do so, I would be really interested to hear from you, from your perspective, what should we do? Should we stop financing Asian Development Bank? I hope colleagues from Asian Development Bank wouldn't mind. But should we, let's put it this way, let's put it in a more politically correct way. Should we find other way to partner with international organizations and only provide direct financing to the organizations from developing countries, being very conscious that that would mean that the amount of money we invest will definitely be smaller? Should we do this? Or should we instead continue working with international organizations because they provide immediate relief? They provide immediate impact on the lives and well-being of the societies impacted by climate change. There is, I don't have anything, but this is something that would be good to discuss. If you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, these are the types of the dilemmas that I wanted to talk about. Another very important pillar of our operation of GCF, as I mentioned, is that we are country-driven. What does it mean? You might have heard that nowadays almost all of the developing countries have, and developed countries have what we call nationally determined contributions. So they have committed to decrease their emissions. They also have national action plans on adaptation. So when we come to the country, we want to do what the country wants to do with our money. But that brings up the question, what if the country wants to use our money for adaptation project, for which the number of beneficiaries which will not be very high because it's a small country? So if you measure our impact just by a number, we won't achieve our KPIs. The number of beneficiaries will be low. Or what if we come to the country and they want to invest into green energy, but we know that for $1 invested in this country, we will receive much less CO2 reduction than if we invest in some other bigger country, which is much more, much less energy efficient, right? We all know that we can only achieve very significant decrease of pollution or very significant growth of efficiency at the very beginning of the scale. When we are grossly inefficient, it's relatively cheap to decrease, to make the curve less steep, right? If you are polluting horribly, it's relatively cheap to decrease your pollution to the level when it's more or less okay. But then with every increment, the curve becomes more and more steep. So how do we deal with this? Where is the compromise? How do we bring together global and local issues? Now, we addressed a little bit of accountability. We have this well-established procedure to make sure that the money are being used for the purpose they are allocated, but that's inevitably decreases our efficiency. It's bureaucracy. We need to do random checks. We need to work on the monitoring and evaluation. Next burning question, and this is super interesting. Can we use public money to encourage private sector? And as I mentioned, because the public proceedings of our board are open, I feel okay to share that. Several board meetings, going back several board meetings, I think it was last year, we wanted to improve access to our finance to private sector. By this, we wanted to essentially limit, to a certain extent, not completely, but limit the government's ability to have a say who is getting money. What do you think? We have developed countries and developing countries. How did they vote? Who was in favor of increasing accessibility of public finance to private capital, and who was against this? What do you think?
Let's guess that the developed countries were in favor or not?
Developed countries were in favor. There was one developing country that was also in favor. One. Which one?
China.
South Korea.
South Korea. I don't see that.
South Korea is still under UN classification. South Korea can access our money. South Korea is still a developing country. The board member from South Korea was very supportive towards improving access to climate finance of public sector, even though it is to private sector, even though it is public money. I think it's amazing. I think it's very telling. But again, I do very well understand the rationale of the governments who want to have a say. I also understand the rationale of some of the developed countries who voted for but had some limitations, because essentially we are increasing competitiveness in private sector, right? So we're using their public money to increase somebody else's private sector competitiveness. Shall we do this? And then, yes, the final dilemma is, again, as I shared with you, what would be a success of GCF? We celebrated 10 years, and we are now self-reflecting. We are thinking, what are our measurements? We are using money invested, number of countries achieved, number of projects. How does success look like? What is our core? How can we demonstrate that we deliver? What would be the best indicator for us to use? So this is what we do in a nutshell. I think I talked even longer than I planned. I'd like to stop here. First of all, thank you very much. And I also, didn't even thank you, Danny, for invitation. I'm really honored to be part of this really long-standing lecture series. And over to you.
Yeah. Questions? We may not have answers, but questions.
Yes.
Easy one. As you said, Korea is considered to be still a developing country. How is that determined? Because for me, it's hard to see Korea as developing instead of developed.
I don't know. It's not an easy one. The UN has their own classification, which is very difficult to change. It was established for the purpose of Paris Agreement. It was established when the Paris Agreement was signed. I can only comment that, for example, Ukraine is not eligible to receive our funding. South Korea is eligible, Ukraine not. Ukraine is classified as a transitional country, not developing country. So yes, and China is also eligible and is classified as developing country. China has never accessed our money, but we have accredited entities with them. But I'm sure I will Google.
You mentioned many approaches, policies, but actually this is part of, I think, more quantitatively how to allocate your money or how to maximally portfolioize is kind of operations research or management science technique can be involved, I think. Yeah, so have you ever used those kind of OR approaches in decision making of how to optimally allocate?
Yeah, thank you very much. We do have mechanisms to optimize allocation. We do have what we call a climate rationale, as I mentioned. So each and every project we have benchmark of what is the minimum benchmarks of per dollar invested, what is the CO2 emissions or the number of the beneficiaries from the project. But that works on the project level. When it comes to the global level, it is politically super difficult to be fair. It would be super technocratic approach, and it's not always possible. Thank you.
Actually, the city of Incheon actually hosted your organization. I think one of major reason is to boost economy or boost the vibrant environment of that area. So related with that kind of thing, your organization really did something.
Yeah, thank you very much. City in Incheon indeed very kindly hosts our organization. We are the international organization with a global reach. So our mandate is to work with all developing countries. But we work very closely with Incheon metropolitan government in terms of boosting social life, exchange, providing lectures, working with local students. We are not investing. The only mechanism that we have to invest is through project proposals. And so there need to be a project proposal coming from one of the accredited entities, for example, in Korea, submitted to our board and approved if we are to allocate money to Incheon government as such. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to ask if you could say a few words about the relationship between the U.S. government's dramatic change in climate change policy recently, and has it affected or will it likely affect in the future your activity or your plans?
Yeah, thank you very much. Of course, the US is a very important player, and they did withdraw from Paris Agreement, and they did withdraw from our board. That's correct. For the last replenishment cycle, last time when we raised money, we didn't receive any contributions to the US, but our other contributors stepped up, and our replenishment was successful. We truly believe that because what we do is innovative and important, this replenishment cycle will also be successful. But it is, US has tremendous potential, and it is, of course, not to the public good, the current geopolitical mood. Yeah, thanks.
Just a question. When you evaluate projects, there's of course a financial component, and there's a kind of the expected outcome for the climate. Kind of how do you balance those two? And this kind of a sub question is, how do you calculate the effect for the climate? Because it's notoriously difficult sometimes to compare alternatives technically.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Indeed, the project needs to be financially viable, and project needs to have a very strong climate rationale. We do have various fiduciary instruments. We do have various tools to provide money. We provide grants, but we also provide loans. We provide what I find a very interesting instrument. We call it on granting or financial allocation mechanism. So for example, we provide money to our accredited entities for them to announce competitions to award grants on the basis of the certain predefined components. So the final beneficiaries of the project will not be identified at the time when the project comes to our board, but only the criteria on which our accredited entity will identify the beneficiaries. These criteria will be part of our evaluation, will be part of our project proposals. We also provide loans, guarantees, and equity funds. And for each of these potential instruments, all our accredited entities, first of all, as I mentioned, go through strategic due diligence, through accreditation. So we look at their systems, we look at their portfolio, we look at their capacity, essentially, licenses, of course. So that's on the institutional level. On the project level, we have the independent technical body. It's called Independent Technical ITAP. The board the panel of the technical experts in each sector, in each field, and they're not part of the secretariat. They report to our board, and when the secretariat put together the funding proposal package, it goes to this to ITAP, and then they recommend or not recommend the project to go through. I'm not in position to talk about detailed mechanisms on how the feasibility is evaluated. I would be happy to put you in contact with people on the ground. My background and expertise is on working with the accreditation, with the entities on the institutional level.
You mentioned various forms of funding that will be given to developing countries. The funding is given mostly to developing countries, not developed countries. And what is the main form of funding? Is it given in the form of grant? You mentioned several forms, but mostly grant, not in the form of loan, because some loan. How is it different from ODA, Official Development Assistance?
Thank you. It's a great question, and it could be part of the dilemma that we might discuss. First of all, we only provide finance. Our money are only used in developing countries to implement projects in developing countries. They could be used by organizations that are not based in developing countries, like, as I mentioned, MUFG, for example, or even KDB. KDB received money from us to implement projects in Vietnam, in Indonesia, and other countries in the region. But money only goes to developing countries. Now, loans or grants, we provide both. And the difference between ODA and us is because we require climate rationale, very clear climate rationale of the project. But shall we only do grants? We were at some point heavily criticized that we do grants because everybody else also does grants. Let's do more advanced fiduciary instruments. When we started providing loans, we were criticized because we are increasing public debts. So there are pluses and minuses in each instrument, and that is why the process of evaluating and identifying projects It's not as easy as we would like to have.
Thank you for that interesting talk. You mentioned that the meetings are available to view online live. Could you just speak about how we might find those and where should we go to find those?
Yes, so if you go to our website, if you just Google GCF, Green Climate Fund, you go to our website and you will see boards, tabs of boards, and then each and every board has all documents published. Every funding proposal is published. Every review, so if you want to look at, again, poem UFG, CMBS, let's talk about CMBS or KDB or COICA. If you want to look at their governance instruments or how they are faring with environmental social standards, you can identify when they were presented to the board, and their review is also published. But these are the documents. But then when you go on this tab, you will see videos on demand. It's not straightforward because, as I mentioned, some of the discussions are boring, but everything is there. And also, next board is on 24th, 27th of March here in Songdo. It will be broadcasted live on our website as well. Okay.
Let me ask bluntly, what is your success/failure rate of all the projects? Like any bank, there's gonna be failure.
I don't know, Benny, honestly, I don't know, because, and I don't know, not just because it's not immediately my scope. My success and failure is how many of accredited entities are programming, how many of them have money. And this, I can't say I'm super successful, unfortunately, but for the projects, it's also because, how do you define the failure? I don't believe we ever had, but yeah, I might defer to other colleagues, but I don't believe we ever had a catastrophic failure, like withdrawing a project. That's not, I don't think so. But yes, quite a few of the projects are delayed.
The reason I'm asking that, all jokes aside, the reason I'm asking that is because this seems to be somewhat of a reverse approach of what Chinese funding is doing, where they want to fail so they can take over the collateral, almost like a subprime mortgage situation. And also, you mentioned Nepal as a recent project. What guarantees do you have that money goes to the project, not to other corrupted sources?
Yeah, thank you. I don't believe we have collaterals, and we are definitely not taking over. But in terms of anti-corruption measures, we are super serious on that. So all the projects, and this is also one of the, again, it's not a barrier, but it is a requirement for our accredited entities to be able to legally receive money from our treasury. Our treasury is the World Bank. And surprisingly, not everybody has this ability. So there are some, for example, in some of the regions of the world, some NGOs, they legally cannot receive money from international sources. Then they have to have a dedicated GCF account, which is monitored and available for us to monitor. And of course, the disbursements are only by demand and by defined milestones. Yeah, so we rely on their systems, and we do have a Department of Monitoring and Evaluation. We do have an annual project reporting. That's a must, and we do have a system of evaluating how our accredited entities remain in line with our standards on the institutional level.
Thank you very much. I have one more question. College students here, raise your hand. University students? Got a couple? 3, 4, something like that. You don't want to admit that you're a student? Could university students get an internship at GCF?
Yes, you can, and I believe there are a couple of internships already open. You need to monitor our website. I think it's only open to master students. not undergrads. But yes, every year we accept a cohort of international students to make internship.
Quick question. To mitigate climate change, one of the option or alternative option can be SMR. Do you also support the SMR, small modular reactor, or nuke? Yeah.
So technically speaking, GCF does not have an exclusion list. We follow the UN policies and procedures. I would imagine that this technology would probably not be in line with our environment and social expectations. No emission agreed, but yeah, there are some other limitations. Okay, I'm very conscious of time.